Now, I'm sure I wasn't the only one who had several eyebrows almost pop out of their heads when they first saw this game back in March. Square Enix releasing an RTS? Had the world gone mad? Or was this one big Hideo Kojima style prank or something? Nope. Apparently it was neither of those, believe it or not. This is in fact a legitimate RTS that brings its own unique flavor to the table with influences from the likes of Final Fantasy XII, Diablo, and even League of Legends of all things. Go figure. But ultimately, the big questions must be asked. Is this game worth your time? And does it rival Triangle Strategy in terms of wanting to stay up playing past 5 AM until your brain melts? Well, let's answer these very important concerns and more in today's episode of Should You Play the DioField Chronicle? Much like the economically driven War of Nations featured in Triangle Strategy, the DioField Chronicle story is all about serving big slabs of exposition and rigorously practicing politics till the cows come home. Except the main difference here is that the narrative isn't nearly as engaging as Serenoa's quest to protect the mighty House Wolfort. There's too much focus on plot-specific events and not enough spotlight on the core themes and heart of the human struggle that truly great stories draw from. So when the high-impact moments appear on screen, they straight up do not land most of the time. Rather than the audience reeling from a tragic loss, we're simply told how shocking the result was instead. Luckily, the story does start to pick up somewhat in the second half, but by then it's too little, too late. It's a shame because the main cast is voiced quite well, and there are multiple scenes of levity where these characters will just let their guard down and be themselves, but these are optional conversations, not the main course. What is really cool is that the game actually rewards you for seeking out these unskippable cutscenes with gold, materials, and rank ups. So even if you're not too keen on observing a British bunch of buffoons, just watch them, you'll get free stuff.
You grew up hunting in the harsh wilds of Northfield, didn't you, Rickles? It takes talent and experience to survive in an environment like that. Iska likely saw that in you and decided to help you fulfill your potential.
Thanks, Andreas. Sometimes you know exactly what to say, don't you? Not as much as Iskarian, though.
Oh, really?
When it comes to the gameplay, this is where the DioField Chronicle really shines. If you're anything like me and have an actual brain aneurysm anytime you attempt to make a quick decision in an RTS, then you're in luck. The real-time elements are exclusively kept to auto attacks, unit highlighting, and movement paths. That's it. Whereas the main commands stop the game dead in its tracks and let you plan out exactly what to do next, which is a godsend. You can even speed up battles too if you wish, as well as pause to zoom the map right out with one button press to easily plan your next dastardly deed, all while witnessing each and every unit turn into a slick-looking D&D figurine. The abilities themselves are quite varied and do have a number of practical uses on the battlefield. Plus, they can also be leveled up to tailor specific moves to your playstyle. The sword fighter Andreas, for instance, can rush behind a single enemy for heavy back attack damage, while the archer Iskarian can summon a volley of arrows to mow down a column of stationary enemies. Since you can switch from one character's ability to the next and combo enemies into oblivion if you plan it out well, you can already see how awesome this is. Alongside being able to call forth classic Final Fantasy-based summons like Bahamut and Fenrir for big-time epicness, the DioField Chronicle actually lets the 4 main party members bring along another teammate to access their abilities and swap out characters 3 times mid-combat, which adds extra layers of strategy into the mix. Also, the fact that you don't need to return to the encampment before battle, like in Triangle Strategy, to purchase, upgrade, and shop for gear and abilities makes this setup automatically better by default. Another aspect that kept my brain intact is that there are only 4 active player-controlled fighters at once. It honestly keeps the visual clutter to a minimum and makes each unit easy to identify and see who's being targeted in the heat of battle. Not only do the maps have a varying visual aesthetic, which is very easy on the eyes, but certain encounters frequently encourage you to consider the terrain, items, and obstacles on the map too. One mission in particular has you escorting a carriage as several approaching groups of enemies need to be dealt with from random directions, which forces you to decide whether you should split up or not split up your party. As a whole, I must say, the missions are often very well designed. You're even given incentives to finish them off under a certain time limit or win without any allies falling in battle, which can then be used to further upgrade your party. The only part about combat that felt a little off was the AI. Occasionally, it would cause units to accidentally stumble into a massive, time to get absolutely wrecked charge attack, which would flat out devastate them for the most stupid reason. But in all seriousness, these issues didn't happen enough to detract that much from the overall experience. It should be noted that running side quests and replaying battles are almost a must, unfortunately, especially on the harder difficulties, since the level progression and the cost to purchase equipment rises much higher between main story missions. It is a bit disappointing that this is the case, but then again, it does encourage you to see almost everything this game has to offer. Every cloud has a silver lining, I suppose. Not the music, however. It honestly started to get on my nerves throughout the journey, especially since the OST reuses a lot of the same tracks. If I could articulate the music in one sentence, it would be generic hero strings meets generic brass meets generic legato notes that I cannot remember. In other words, generic. Outside of battle though, players control Andreas as he treks through the Blue Fox headquarters, the main hub of his ragtag mercenary group. Here, he can seek out side quests, upgrade his abilities, summons and equipment, partake in those conversations I mentioned before, and raise the rank of the Blue Foxes. Each rank up grants the player a neat bonus like an extra item slot, more EXP per mission, or additional TP to summon your enemy's worst nightmares on the regular. I also love that Andreas can teleport between each room, so players don't need to walk from one end of the building to the other for the 400th time that day. Efficiency is definitely this game's forte. So, should you play the DioField Chronicle? Well, if you're a big RTS or tactical RPG fan, then I would recommend picking this one up purely for the gameplay. The DioField Chronicle features a distinct mix of real-time strategy and tactical turn-based combat that allows for some super cool looking combos and setups which are ultra addictive to pull off. Do not be surprised if you find yourself forgetting which day it is like in Triangle Strategy. While the plot does have some interesting revelations and twists and turns waiting to be discovered, the story ultimately lacks that special something the audience can closely resonate with. Thankfully, the character interactions do help keep the otherwise solemn plot approachable, and the optional cutscenes and content do reward the player in more ways than one. Even though the difficulty curve practically forces the player to tackle said content and grind at times too, it's all worth going through as the battles themselves are just so much fun. Guys, make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already, as we release videos like this each and every week. And be sure to check out thebetanetwork.net for my full written review on the DioField Chronicle.